Hey everyone, Sleepy Reader again from the backyard. The heat keeps the neighbors inside, and so it's kind of quiet out here. Well, except for some truck beeping in the distance. This time I'm, for once, not doing a haul. Those are easy. Doing a little harder thing, my comic book thoughts. I'm going to cover, this is more than 13 comics, but I'm going to cover 13 comics and rank them in my old countdown way from number 13 to number 1 based purely on my own personal pleasure in reading them. At the time I happened to read them, so it's a very subjective kind of thing. I'm not trying to be a critic and figure out what's the best and what's not, just tell you my feelings. And so I had not been reading new comics even when they started coming out again. I even bought a whole bunch of extra ones online before when COVID first hit, and then I lost the interest in reading the new comics, and I didn't have as much free time as I thought because my daughter being home 100% of the time took up a lot more of my energy than I realized it would, in a good way, but still less reading time. And then a little more than a week ago, I was invited by Bob to join in his early Saturday morning comic book review show, and so I had to read at least some of my new comics for that week. And that kind of got me back in the mood for doing it, so thank you very much to Bob. It was a lot of fun, and it is fun to read the new comics, especially when they're coming out. So I'm trying to catch back up, and maybe in another week or two I'll actually be doing a countdown of the comics of just that week. But what I've just done in the last few days is do a big catch-up on a bunch of indie comics I've been reading. So this countdown is going to be entirely indie comics, and some of them I'm going to be judging from 2 or 3 issues, some from just 1 issue, depending on how much I had to catch up on. And other than maybe the first 2 on this list, I had a great time reading all of them, but I don't think any of them kind of were the obvious number 1. So what comes in at the top 4 or 5 was a little tricky to choose, and all of them, you might say, had flaws for me, and positive things and negative things. But one of them did stand out as, for some reason, I had the most fun reading that, so I put that at number 1. So let's start with number 13, my least favorite comic in this stack. It came out, I guess, 2 weeks ago, was Engine Ward, which I like that title. I can't remember what the description was in the original solicit that made me, I actually put this on my pull list ahead of time, maybe just because of the cover image. I really like that. It says, Earth is an ancient myth. So where this really takes place and what exactly the culture is that's going on is not clear yet. And it's just written in a way where I think the author understands so much more of his world and his ideas than we, the reader, do. And it's just frustrating. Maybe this will all resolve in the second issue. I'm not taking it off my pull list yet. The art also was, for me, just okay. Joe Eisma, he's been on a bunch of other stuff that I read over the years, and he never super grabbed me, even though he did this cover, but the art on the inside doesn't have the pizzazz of this cover for me. But it'll be kind of interesting to see if this, by the second or third issue, develops into a story that makes a lot of sense. There's obviously this culture. I would have thought it was on a future Earth, but I guess it's on a different planet. And there's archaeology, and there's some people maybe with extra powers who kind of are exploiting everyone else in this culture, or maybe there's 2 separate cultures. I wasn't even clear on that. There were these people who seemed to be called the Celestials, and then our group of archaeologist adventurers who were following. But so I didn't hone in strongly on any of the characters, and I didn't hone in strongly on what the world was and everything. So that's why this comes in at number 13. Almost equally as disappointing, but somehow I enjoyed it a little more in some fashion, was the new Christopher Priest book, Sacred Six, which I think is not only a spin-off from Vampirilla, but kind of a reference to a bunch of other supernatural female stories, which may or may not have been featured in Dynamite Comics. I don't know, but I think a lot of them come from Warren, maybe, or other places. And maybe some of them were made up by Christopher Priest. There's Draculina, Pantha, Nyx, Chastity, and Lilith. And it says, good, evil, repeat. So even though I had given up on Christopher Priest's Vampirilla, which I was enjoying for a while, but after a while I got tired of it being hard to parse what was going on. And I can see coming back to his Vampirilla run, maybe when I can buy it cheaply or get it out of the library or something and see if it makes more sense. But I thought, I'll get in on this first issue. There's a town that has supernatural qualities, and these 6 female characters, I think, are supposed to be protectors of it. But so there was a lot of intriguing stuff. Christopher Priest is this odd, talk about a writer who knows more of what's going on than his readers does. His confidence about it comes through, and sometimes you just think, well, if I'm just patient, I'll catch up to it all. And this had nice art on the inside. I like that quite a bit. But I have to say, I read the whole issue, and I just don't know what Christopher Priest is up to here. And the point of a first issue should be to make me feel like I have some idea of what kind of book I'm buying. This is not on my pull list, and unless I hear other people say, oh wow, it really started to make sense with issue 2 or something, then I might pick it up off the rack. But maybe again something to get cheaply someday, or in a cheap trade, or at the library, and just see if it makes more sense, because I certainly like the basic idea of a secret team of all these kind of supernatural female characters. So that was number 12. In at number 11 was Olympia, which may or may not be the final issue. They do end it by saying the end ? The story here has wrapped up, and they did give you this really thick issue. I think they didn't charge extra. Oh no, they did charge extra for $6 instead of $4. But anyway, it's a generous chunk. But the art, it was a big action issue, and the artist is not that great at action, despite all their references to Kirby, and maybe the whole emotional resonance to everything that went on just felt kind of forced, and the feel-good ending was there, but I just didn't feel involved, and I don't know where that lands. I like the flashing it here. I really like the coloring. And the art, someone else, maybe it was Bullseye Bob. Anyway, someone else said that this looked like rough draft thumbnails drawn in Sharpies. I'm not sure who said that, but someone on YouTube said that, and they were very right. And it really shows, when we get the action scenes, and the blacks are just someone going with a marker. And maybe they thought that had a special intensity. I could see, in theory, but it just didn't work. It didn't pop off the page. The action wasn't exciting. The colorist is doing a lot of work to give the comic more body, more heft. So, not terrible. It was only those first 2 that I, really didn't know what was going on, but just not as much as I was hoping for, you might say. Colorist is D. Cuniff. So that colorist gets a lot of praise, a big thumbs up for me. Colorists and color, pretty awesome this week. Not that these comics were all from this week, but in this batch of comics that I read. There are colorists out there that ruin comics for me, and there are colorists who just make it awesome. And I'm starting to think some of these creator-owned comics ought to be cutting the colorist in as one of the creators, because the colorist may really be creating the look and the feel of the visuals of the story, and without them, or with a different colorist, it would be a different book. So then we come to Decorum. I read 2 issues in a row. And so this is in at number 10. And with the incredible art here and the superstar writer, Jonathan Hickman, I expected this to be high up on my list. But it only came in at number 10. And the reason is, when you get down to it, I think by issue 3 in particular, where we get to the assassin's school, it's a thin, silly story. It just, I mean, maybe there's a sense of humor here that I'm not getting, but there's this long dialogue or set of dialogues with people at the applicants for the assassin school and our heroine and her mentor, and it's just silly. It's just silly. And there really isn't, I mean, there is a whole subplot, I guess, of some Church of the Singularity, but that also felt so far just like some cliched apocalyptic church out in the cosmos. And so nothing feels very substantial here except for the art and, of course, the fancy presentation that Jonathan Hickman likes to do. It's a great deal. I mean, it's a really nice comic book. It's thick and heavy on really nice paper for $3.99. And you get some, let me see if I can find some. You get some just really knockout art that feels like it was painted. And not, this page actually happens to be mixed media, but the whole feel is of mixed media. Like the media changes every chapter or so, and the artist shows off a different side of his talents. Maybe more of that was in issue 2, but I mean, like, look at that. So it's a beautiful comic, and I'm not pulling it off my actually, maybe it's not on my pull list. Maybe I've been grabbing it off the shelves. I'm not sure whether to keep getting it or not, but the art makes me want to keep getting it. And the story just leaves me, it's like, it might be that Jonathan Hickman, kind of like he does, even though I was not a big fan of Hoxpox, he obviously has a huge vision in Hoxpox. I didn't hate Hoxpox, I just had mixed feelings about Hoxpox. But, or maybe I lied there. Did I hate it? Love these full spread covers, wraparound covers. Yeah, the artist here, Huddleston, is just amazing. I think he does all the colors. They don't. Russ Wooten's they don't list a colorist, so I assume Huddleston is doing the colors too. And it's just an amazing piece of comic book creation on the visual side. Now, maybe, like I was saying, maybe eventually Hickman will prove that his vision is deeper and more interesting and more complex than it appears so far. But it appears so far like there's a simple story about an assassin school and about an evil religious cult, and that's all there is. But he's fancying it up with all this other stuff, with all this visual and verbal hand-wavium. So, and I wonder where he's going with the idea of decorum. Like, our assassin is into being very polite and having lots of decorum, but once we go to the assassin school, there's no decorum there at all. So that's one of the things that intrigues me most about where is this comic going with the concept of decorum. Because the other stuff, assassins and evil churches, dime a dozen. Another generally excellent comic that maybe I expected a little more from. This is their big 25th issue, and they charged more, $5, and it's very thick, but a lot of it is other stuff that isn't Oblivion Song. I'm not that interested in Science Dog, and I think this is just maybe a teaser for bringing Science Dog back. I didn't actually read the whole Science Dog story. Just looking at it kind of bored me. I know Science Dog was Robert Kirkman's attempt at proving he could do an all-ages comic, The fact that I'm looking at something that's supposed to be an all ages comic, and I'm just seeing people sitting around talking, the inner child in me is not attracted to it. I haven't tried reading it with my daughter. And then yet another preview of his other new comic, what's it called? Firepower, which I'm seeing this preview everywhere. And then the Oblivion Song story itself, which I think was just a regular size story. It does skip years ahead. Once again, I think it's the second time we've had a big skip ahead in time. It looks beautiful. It's kind of interesting, but it's suddenly not quite clear. Kirkman is playing his cards too close to his vest, so it's not quite clear now what the stakes are. There's something. Now our hero seems to have teamed up with the natives of the Oblivion dimension, and there's some kind of problem that he's trying to help them solve. But other than that, I don't know what it is. And I'm confused. I think that the character over in Oblivion is our character from... There's two brothers, right? Is this, with the long hair, the same as then later we see someone? I guess he's got his hair pulled back. He looks so different. It suddenly looked like we were on Earth for something. The room looked very earthly. But anyway, so I had that moment of, did we just move scenes or didn't we? Kirkman, at least in Oblivion Song, is not wanting to tell us enough about when we're in scene A or scene B or scene C. So anyway, that slight frustration brought this one in for me at number 9. At number 8, I enjoyed quite a lot reading the first 2 issues of Rogue Planet. But on a certain level, which is not necessarily a terrible thing at all, it's yet another kind of inspired by the Alien movie and Aliens, but more Alien, I think, type of movie with the corporate space type people, or maybe they're freelancers, but they live in kind of a corporate, dingy, outer space kind of world, arriving on a planet that turns out to be filled with something horrific. But it's done really well, and it is quite creepy and scary to read. I'm glad I didn't read it just before going to bed. It would have affected my dreams. And I really like the art in issue 2. I think there's only been these 2 issues so far. So it's enjoyably creepy, and maybe there'll be some twist to what's going on that will kick this up a notch, or maybe it'll just be a good, fun, scary comic that presumably will last for 5 or 6 issues and then be done. I don't know. I don't know where Colin Bunn is going with that. But I certainly enjoyed reading it. Another enjoyable read in at number 7 was Billionaire Island, number 3, from Mark Russell, who's at this point well known for his satirical comics with their kind of left-leaning, just somewhat left-leaning message. I mean, yes, the left is less likely to like billionaires, and in here the billionaires are all utterly immoral and basically drain the earth of resources and then go off to have a final party on their island while the rest of the earth dies before they do. It does have this either brilliant or absolutely ridiculous concept of the richest person in the world is this dog who inherited a huge fortune and then somehow, through sending messages by what food he eats, invested in all the right stocks and is now the richest mammal on the world, I guess. So lots of crazy hijinks. It didn't, I'm still compare Russell's work to what he did in the Flintstones, and so far he's still never topped that, but I enjoy this a lot. I don't take it as a great work of art yet. Kind of on the, I guess I like it a little more even than his, what was that called? The one where Jesus becomes roommates with a guy who's like Superman. Second Coming, I think it was called. This is kind of at that level. Maybe it's better than that in a way. Yeah, it's better than that. I enjoy it. It has a greater consistency than that one did. Both have some creative points and some fun satire and some stuff that's just silly. Speaking of horror, a lot of us have talked about how there's kind of a horror renaissance in comics right now, and I definitely think that's true. Horror is a genre I like, but maybe not the first genre I turn to, but I'm liking a lot of these horror books. And I continue to like Red Mother a lot. This is number 6. Kind of like the simplicity of that cover. It came in at number 6 for me. And so issue number 6 came in at number 6 in my ranking. Sometimes Red Mother has come higher. I think at this point the story feels a little stretched out, and there's a certain sense of repetition of the same feeling of dread over again, although our main character, whose name I now can't remember exactly, can I find someone saying it right at the beginning? Anyway, the woman who lost an eye in the first issue and seems to be being haunted by, and her boyfriend just completely disappeared, probably something to do with the Red Mother. She moves to England, and she's involved in this interesting kind of art history project. So it's all still very interesting, but the emotional tone of each issue kind of repeats. There's a cool, scary final panel that I liked, but again, yeah. So it's a good comic with good art. For me, the coloring is up and down. Some of the coloring is really good, and some is less so. I think the illustrator's doing the coloring, Danny Luckert. But overall, cool thing. I think Red Mother will probably be best read in trades when it's all done. That's how it feels to me. I'm enjoying reading it on a monthly basis, or when I was getting it monthly. But it's the story progress is such that I think when read all together, it will groove. It will be scarier, in fact. Unless, well, that's my prediction. It's hard to know when you're reading these things in individual issues exactly how they will play out when read all together. But that's my gut feeling. Usagi Yojimbo is a wonderful example of a comic that is perfectly made for serial reading. So if you get trades of it, read a story and then take a break and then read some more stories, and I'm sure you'll appreciate it more that way. This is issue 10 now, so we've been going for quite a while. Issue 10 of the new color reboot, at least in terms of numbering and having color and moving to a different publisher. Another solid issue. Some of the issues have been so great in these previous 9 ones that my expectations are very high. So this one ranks a little lower than often. Usagi comes in at number 1 for me. Just in my mood, I was ready to be blown away by this Usagi, and I just enjoyed it. So I rank it at number 5. But let's face it, these all of the top, 9 are ones I enjoyed a lot. Actually, the top 10, but definitely the top 9. So coming in at number 5 is definitely very good for this week. But somehow it didn't rise up quite the way other ones did, and maybe it's partially my mood. It was a very grim story. It's kind of people make mistakes, and then they make their mistakes worse by making more mistakes, if that makes sense. Two tragic ends, and war, even after a long time after the war is over, just leads to more tragedy and bad decisions and sadness. So it was very sad, and maybe that's why. And while the story kind of continued, it also has a nice cliffhanger that I'm hoping will pay off. So this is kind of a one and done story. Normally, if it was just called Mon, and a Mon is one of these symbols that he wears on his clothing. Normally, if he is doing a two-part story, he'll tell you right there it's a two-part story. So I assume the next story will pick up off what happened at the end of the story, but will be a separate story. And an interesting thing is in this issue, he was back in the countryside where he grew up. And I think in the next issue, we're going to go to his home village. So I'm really interested in that, too. So then another comic that I rated quite a bit higher than I might have was Join the Future. And I read 2 issues. It's a cool science fiction Western in a way. And it's interesting. It kind of ties into the fact that I've been reading some Jonah Hex lately, which is these very grim Westerns. And this is a very grim kind of world where the small town world of people who take care of themselves is being overrun in a very literal way by the world of cities. And so that's very sad. But so one of the things that really makes it pay off for me is I love Peter Kowalski, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Kowalski's art, and I love Brad Simpson's coloring of his art. So it's a visual treat for me. And then it has it's a simple story of revenge and possibly defeat. And like I said, the whole theme of the cities versus the country in a very negative view of the cities and of technology. So I enjoyed it a lot. And it must have just been my mood. It's kind of funny that Usagi ranked a little bit lower because it was grim, because this is very grim too. But it just tickled me at the right moment in the right way. So I went with it and enjoy it. And it hasn't been on my pull list, so I need to make sure that I get hold of issue 4. I assume it's not going to be a real long-running one. It's Aftershock. And the writer's name is Zach Kaplan, and I looked at the copyrights, and it's copyright 2020 by Zach Kaplan and Aftershock Comics. So it seems a great crime to me in a way that Peter Kowalski has no... he doesn't have a piece of the action here, because a lot of what makes this comic good is his artwork. And the colors. The colors should have a little piece of the action, too. They do have bios of everyone at the back, so they're giving everyone a lot of credit. And maybe Kowalski prefers to be a gun for hire and be paid a little more and not worry about the back end. But I think that's the normal way for Aftershock books. Oh, and going back, with Usagi Yojimbo, sorry for drifting in all different directions. He just won some major Eisner Awards. My theory is, since this book came out in color, it's gotten renewed attention. And even though cognoscenti, people who really know their comics, knew this was a great comic book, not me. It took me to read it when it's color. Now there's is it a Netflix or some other kind of TV show, animated TV show planned? And he suddenly wins the Eisners. So I feel like going to color really brought him out, put the spotlight on what great work and what a genius Stan Sakai is in the realm of comics. And I can't wait to read when all the colorized stuff comes out. I still will insist I have trouble reading Usagi Yojimbo when it's in black and white. Okay. Then I ranked at number 3, Adventure Man, which I read the first 2 issues, which is quite a chunky read. Has this absolutely sort of beautiful but almost too perfect artwork by the Dodsons. Terry Dodson doing the pencils and colors, and Rachel doing the inks. And the colors, I liked at first, but after a while, there seemed to be kind of a repetition. And here's the colors in, quote, the real world, our non-fictional modern world. And here's the colors in our fictional world. So it really would have been useful if Terry, doing his own colors, had made something very different in the coloring scheme. Maybe there's some subtle differences that I didn't catch. But sometimes the art is so pretty that it keeps me from getting as deep into the story. This could have been, I enjoyed this a lot, because I love the whole metafictional stuff, especially involving pulp, and I've been kind of getting into Doc Savage lately anyway, and it's obviously very Doc Savage influenced. In fact, Matt Fraction mentions someone giving him a Philip Jose Farmer's book about Doc Savage, which I've yet to read, so I need to dig into that. I think I recently bought the Kindle edition of that book. And another funny thing about this is Fraction says how he met the Dodsons. I enjoyed working with Team Dodson. Second most important, don't write the X-Men. So he met the Dodsons while writing the X-Men. And it's weird because although it kind of resembles Doc Savage's team, I kind of found when all the villains are introduced and when all the good guys are introduced and the way everything is kind of played out in big action sequences as a very pretty version of what 90s X-Men was like. And then when we have our hero at her family dinner, which she comes from some kind of mixed family, probably of adoptees, and each one has their own special, more everyday power, like a great cook or a great doctor or nurse or librarian. They all seem like they're members of kind of a non-super version of the X-Men too. So it had this weird 90s X-Men angle to it for me. And the other thing is this character is a single mom who used to be a cop, which is a little weird now in the context of all the stress around cops, because the idea of being a cop here is just all in good fun. But that's probably how it should be in a pulpy story like this. But she just comes off as more bland, and her son seems like the interesting one. Even though Fraction has given her all kinds of qualities, like she's an ex-cop who's deaf and runs a bookstore, and she likes her deafness, she likes the silence, and she really doesn't like to have to put her hearing aids in and hear all the noise of the world. So that's cool, and I wonder, is it because the Dodsons just drew her looking like a beautiful supermodel? Is that why I find her hard to relate to? There's plenty of it, like her son has a more interesting look to him. But I don't know, I just want to rub some grit into the Dodsons' art. And maybe some of my feeling of distance also comes from the way Fraction writes. Because he's an intellectual writer, and even though he's putting all this characterization in there, is it the art that's keeping me away from the characterization, or is it that Fraction, even trying to do a lot of characterization, is at a remove from it? I'm not sure. I think the battery of my phone is going to run out soon, so I better hurry up. So then at number 2 were these 3 issues of Birthright. I've been with Birthright from the beginning. We're up to issue 45. These issues were the big climax, and I enjoyed it. It was, they just went all out for the cheese, or not the cheese, but, just the big fireworks, so that issue 44 had this is actually the first page of the issue, and every page is like a cover or a splash page that has the grand fight, and it's beautifully colored, beautifully drawn. I kind of thought that what's his name, Andre Bresson's art had gone down a little in 43, and then I sort of saw what he had done in 44 and figured that he was saving his time up for all this incredible stuff and incredible beautiful coloring. So yeah, this, and it was all just a big fight scene, but there was, everything came together emotionally well, except for the mom coming. The mom really seemed like a villain to me earlier in her treatment of the husband and her general attitude towards things, and now she's just one of the good guys, and the husband is like, you're better than me and all of that stuff, and she isn't. I don't know what to make of that, but maybe that's my innate sexism, where I assume a woman has to is not necessarily better than the man. But no, I'm just joking there. And I kind of saw it coming, but it was still kind of clever how they've wrapped up the story and then left one more dangling thread that I think they're going to deal with. I think they're going to go to number 48, so 3 more issues. And when I first heard about that, before I'd read these, I thought, oh, damn, I don't want them to drag it out. But now I'm kind of interested to see what Williamson, the writer Josh Williamson of Flash fame, will do with one more twist in this book. So it plays, it's one of the best fantasy books in comics, in that it's really delivered. A lot of ones start out good and then fizzle or never even finish. So this one is the big epic fantasy story with Lord of the Rings and Narnia and all kinds of other references mixed in, and Conan, in ways that are really fun and well done. And finally, at my number 1, I heard people talking about this. I think there might be an issue number 3, but I only have issue number 1. Number 2, I heard people talking about ludocrats and its nearly incomprehensible kind of way of being written, and I thought I would hate it, but I loved it. It's silly absurdity, and it's pointless, really. I don't know what the point is here. And I don't know how to describe this, and I think I'm running out of battery. But first of all, superstar coloring. So well colored. Definitely, when I looked at this, and then I looked at the credits, and I saw it was copyright by the artist and the writer, wherever the copyright material is. Can't even find that right now. Here it is. Copyright by Kieran Gillen Limited, Big Robot Limited, and Jeff Stokely. Unless Big Robot, no. Oh, Big Robot is Jim Rosenthal. There's a second writer on here. But I think the colorist should have a cut here. The look of this comic is so much by Tamara Bonvillain, who a number of us have talked about as one of the most fun, interesting, and inventive colorists out there right now. She just makes the page look good and always readable. And she doesn't have that problem of muddying up the pages because she's only looking at the digital version of things. So, but Kieran Gillen and his co-writer do an awesome job of just verbal fun. You have to get into the mood for it, and somehow I was in that mood for just verbal silliness, and I even loved these write-ups on the back, which are by the each one's different. No, by the Hyperpope. On the back is a write-up about the comic by the Hyperpope, who I think is kind of the villain of the piece. The great crime in this world of the ludocrats is to be boring. You need ludicrous, hideous, horrible, vicious, and evil, but you can't be boring. That's the crime. I don't know what else to say about them, especially since my battery's running out. So I'll just say I love this. I thought I wouldn't. Number 1 on my list. I guess when I say that nothing knocked me out of my, was like a super number 1 to me, I do like my books to have a more meaning, and this is kind of meaningless. This is almost like, Alfred Jarry meets Alice in Wonderland meets something I never even thought of yet. But fun. Okay, so I will be back soon. I'm making a lot of videos. Talk to you all later.